Oh. All right, so with your paper, I want you to think about the space that you're thinking about gardening. So whether it's in your backyard or on your balcony, in a side yard, you can even garden in your driveway, really on your roof. There's really anywhere that you could garden if you felt so inclined. So the first thing you want to do is actually draw a picture of the space. So I'm just going to make a mock square here, and we're going to say that this is my little garden space that I'm going to do. Very simple, I realize, but that's actually sometimes as simple as it is. So can you see that? Or is that okay? Or is it too shiny? It's okay. All right. So once you've made your space, you're actually going to have to do a little bit of research. So you need to sit and look at your space for a few days or weeks and actually get an idea of how the sun is playing its role in your space, because your sun is going to be key to what kind of plants you can grow and the success of your garden, really. Because you can garden in low lighting spaces or you can garden in full sun. It just depends on what plants you plant, whether or not you're going to have success. So say this is your balcony. Maybe this is your door where you come out to your balcony. I feel like I'm going to get a little bit closer to do this. All right, this works. All right, so you've got your balcony and your door. You're going to look, okay, maybe over in this side you have full sun. And maybe over here you have some shade in the afternoon. Oh, and maybe along here you get no sun at all. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because there might be some things you want to put in there, or there might not be stuff you want to put in there. We'll get to that later. But you just need to understand how the sun moves across your small space. So, or even your large space, really. I mean, it's applicable to all gardening, whether your sun patterns. So it's always important to know, for example, I have in my backyard my vegetable garden, and my vegetable garden is completely full sun. So that's where I plant all of my really like hot vegetables too, like peppers, tomatoes, and things like that. But then on my patio, it's actually more of a partly shady environment. So I do a lot of my herbs and tender things like lettuces and stuff, because they do a little bit better with some more shade in the afternoon and not having that direct hot sun just beating down on them. So you definitely want to make note of your sun on your space. And you probably don't want to draw it actually on the middle. You probably just want to say like over here, full sun. And then we'll do part sun over here. All right. So once you've got your sun ideas, next you kind of want to think about the actual space and size of your balcony or your small area garden. So if you're going in a balcony, the chances of you wanting to grow zucchini and squash are pretty low, because those are going to branch out like crazy and take over your whole patio, and you won't be able to get out, and you won't really enjoy it, and it won't look very good either. So you want to pick plants that are going to do well in your space as well. And the really fun thing about plants is there's a lot of varieties of each type as well. So you need to look for ones that say a bushing variety or a compact variety, because those are going to help you have a diverse and more plants in your space, but then you're not going to be taking over with one of them over top of the others. So that's something else you really want to consider when you're making your garden. All right, then another thing you want to consider is water for your small space. Water is very important, as well as the sun, to your plants and thriving. And a lot of you even mentioned earlier that watering was a task that took a lot of time, or could get backbreaking. So you really want to consider your watering options for this. So when I lived in a small apartment, I actually would attach a hose to my sink and run it out to the balcony and put a little hose head on it, and then I would water my plants with my hose, because honestly, trekking, I was trekking buckets of water at first, and it was cumbersome, it was annoying. And also, if you're dumping a giant bucket onto a small container, you're probably going to let it overflow. It might run down onto your neighbors below. They aren't going to be happy with you. So you really have to consider your watering situation. And on a balcony, you do have to consider your neighbors and the people below you. You can't just be out there watering excessively and if they have like laundry out or they have kids out playing on their balcony, they're going to be really upset if all of a sudden they're just getting soaked with dirty water. So you want to also think about having trays and catchments around to catch any excess water, which you can also use to help water your plants as well. And then if you're in a small space, think about having even a water catchment system. So I'm thinking about rain barrels, but the thing with rain barrels is they come in so many shapes and so many sizes, and you don't have to just use a rain barrel. You can use anything really. I've seen people use a Rubbermaid bin just beside their garden, and that fills up with water, and you don't have to even have a hose. You can just take your bucket, a smaller bucket, and use that. But catching water is so important because rainwater is much more beneficial for your plants than any tap water ever will be. Tap water is obviously treated. A lot of the beneficial organisms for plants are taken out because those aren't as beneficial to us. But the things that grow in rainwater and the natural bacteria and ecology of it is so vital to your plants having nutrients, and especially when you're doing container gardening, your roots don't have the opportunity to grow and spread out and find those nutrients naturally in their environment. So providing it to them with rainwater is important. The other interesting thing about rainwater that a lot of people don't know is it's filled with nitrogen because it generally comes from the sky after a storm. And during a storm, molecules in the clouds are clapping together. That's what makes thunder, which releases atmospheric nitrogen, which then is brought down in the rain, which is the best nitrogen you can get for your plants. And it's actually the only naturally soluble nitrogen that you can get for your plants. So rainwater, I can't stress it enough, is key. It's so good for your plants. So try and install some sort of, even if you have just buckets on your balcony, like juice jugs, and they fill up with water, you can use those to water your plants. That's going to have so many health benefits to your plants versus using the hose or using just your tap water. And then also another thing I do is if you have young grandchildren coming around to your house and you've got kiddie pools, instead of just dumping your kiddie pool onto your lawn, use that water. Get your grandkids even to take buckets out of it and dump it on your flowers and dump it on your plants. Water your containers around. It's a great resource. Anyway, I've digressed, and I will a couple times, so I apologize. I'll try and keep myself coming back. But anyway, all right. So we've talked about sun being very important. The space is also important. Water is important, and all of these things should all be thought about and considered and done before you even touch dirt or soil. But that comes next. So the next thing you want to do when you're gardening in a small space or in your balcony is make sure you have the proper soil. I'm a bit of a soil nut. My background, actually, I went to the University of Waterloo for geography and environmental studies, but one of my favorite classes was sedimentology and soils because it's so important. I mean, you can have the best plant in the world, but if you put it in soil that it doesn't do well with, you're not going to grow a plant. So you really have to make sure your soil is appropriately amended to what you're doing. So there's lots of different types of conditions that are good for certain things. If you're actually gardening in the ground in a smaller space and directly in the ground, you don't have to worry about the nutrients as much because there is going to be a lot of natural nutrients going into the ground and coming in from the rain and just from the wind and brought in from all sorts of outside sources. But you still want to make sure that your ground is workable. I mean, you don't want to have just clay. Clay can be kind of hard and tight for plants to grow through. So you can always add some soil. You can add compost. I try to avoid adding peat just because there is a lot of peat shortages, and there's a wide new studies showing how peat is actually like we're damaging all of our peat supply. So we're trying to stay away from peat in the gardening world. Landscaping world now is a sort of newer thought than before, whereas we used to just pump our gardens full of peat moss, and it does have water retaining benefits, and there's a lot of benefits from peat, but there's other things that you can do instead of using peat, so you can still have that healthy, organic, living garden without necessarily depleting some of our beautiful wetlands. You want to make sure as well, if you're doing container gardening, so if you're on your balcony using containers and pots, you want to use a container or potting soil. I really want that to be stressed, because those soils will already have in them moisture retaining properties that are going to help your root systems stay moist, stay fresh. If you use just a generic like black earth in your pot, you're really denying your roots the ability to spread out. They won't have the air spaces. They're not going to have the nutrients. They're not going to have just the space that they would need to grow healthy and freely. So you want to have that looser container potting mix. I know the dollar store does sell potting mix, although I want to recommend against it only because I've had so many clients who've used it, who've come to me and said their plants have rotted. And I tried it myself, and I found the top got really moldy really, really fast. So I don't know if they're using like older soil or what is going on with that soil, but I don't necessarily recommend it. So I do think, you should try and invest in the $7.99 or the $14.99 bag at the store, the Miracle Grow or something like that's a good quality soil, because you want them to have the nutrients that they need. And that's going to be better for you because you're going to have less watering if you've got a better soil, and you're going to have, I don't know, just healthier plants. So yes, soil is important. So you want to make sure you have the right kind. You also want to have a nice fertilizer. So for me, in my container pots, I don't want to be mixing up fertilizer every single time I do that. So I usually get a slow release fertilizer. I was going to grab it and I totally forgot, but I have a container. It's just like little pellets, and I got it at the nursery. And you just put a scoop in, and it's like little balls, and it lasts 100 days. It's a really good idea to do some kind of a fertilizer like that, a slower release, just because you're not going to have to worry about it so much. And then it's always going to be feeding your plants, which in a container, they really do need that constant feed of nutrients that they can't get naturally. Just like this, and I'm going to go through this because what I wanted to show you guys was a couple ideas for how to optimize your smaller space, because there's so many creative and interesting ways that people have made their balcony gardens. So I always look on Google on images to see my inspiration, even Pinterest too, for ideas, because people are very creative and lots of them are more creative than I. So you can see really fun ideas that they do for their gardens. So this one here, they have like some shelving and they've got some tiering. I really like the tiering idea because you can really get a lot of plants in a smaller space. You can see that in the one picture here too, people have used skids and jugs to make their gardens, which I think is kind of ingenious. I mean, it doesn't necessarily, my brother and his wife, they also did this with their kids. They ended up staining the pallets, and they did make them look a lot nicer. And then they painted the names of the plants that they were having in there. And that was just so that they could have a maximized garden on their porch right out front where they had their full sun, because their backyard actually didn't get enough sun for them to have vegetables, because vegetables in general do need a lot of sun. I thought this one was pretty funny. They have this giant tree growing inside, which is fun as well. But you can see you can make your balcony look quite garden, like just like you are out in the garden or in nature, which is a lot of fun. Here they've got trees. You can see they've got this trellising thing going on. I also like that because you can bring up different heights. Having a variety of heights is also very nice. It's eye-catching. It's nice for your space as well to protect. You can have some hardier, taller plants that protect some of your more tender plants. And another thing too, when you're planting in groups like this, it's really nice because you're going to make little microclimates in your grouping. So you can see here, they've got them all tight together. This airspace in here is going to be a lot more humid. It's going to keep the soils in their containers moist longer. They're going to be beneficial to each other. There's going to be cross-pollination with a variety of plants. So having a diverse variety of plants is also really important to having a healthy plant. If you only plant one type of plant, you risk losing all of your crop in one shot if there's any disease or insect that comes along, especially cucumber beetles, for example. If you only plant cucumbers, the chances of you getting cucumbers will be very slim. It's a better idea to plant a lot of things around your cucumbers that might be more deterrent, that can even mask the smell of your cucumbers so cucumber beetles don't even know that they're there. This was kind of fun. They used their wall. I know those are like IKEA tiles, those wooden tiles they have in the back that they've attached these little pots to. They've probably just screwed those plastic pots onto them and then hung them, which I thought was kind of creative. The thing that's really nice about balcony and small space gardening too is you can really be cost effective. You can use so many things from even around your house already to plant. I saw a person on the Guelph gardening page like actually selling yogurt cups, like used yogurt cups that she had washed out and drilled a hole in the bottom for people to use for seed cups. And then the crazier thing was people were actually buying them. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But really, you can use anything. Old jugs are great. Any plastic containers, plastic lids work as plant trays. Egg cartons work good for starting plants. But then, yeah, and people always have old flower pots kicking around. So you just need to buy some soil, some plants and start that up. And this is a couple ideas. Some people used eaves trough on the fence to plant their plants. That's another fun idea. Although I worry that it might be a little shallow. They might want it to be a little bit deeper than that, but a couple other ideas. This one was really fun too. I really thought this was ingenious. They've clearly used a shoe bag that you could get at the dollar store, and they've hung that and used that to fill up their garden, which I thought was pretty ingenious. One thing I would consider if you were doing this though, is with the tomatoes being on this level, you're probably going to end up blocking out these because they're going to grow really tall. So you'd probably want those to actually be at the top, but that would be my advice, which is what I give. So I guess that's appropriate. Here's another example of tiering as well. I'm always a fan of tiering just because I do find that they can benefit each other in other ways. When you're planting your plants, you want to think about your heights of plants, and you always want to have your taller plants somewhat at the back. Unless you're in a full, bright, hot sun location, then having some of your taller plants at the front is maybe more beneficial because they're going to block some of those harsher rays. But otherwise, you want to think about the end result of your plant. So is it going to grow, like if you plant tomatoes, they're going to grow quite tall. Sometimes they could grow 4 to 5 feet even. So if you have those at the front, they might end up blocking your sun to your vegetables, your lower lettuces and things later on. So you might want to move those to the back of the garden where they're still going to get sun, full sun, even in the summer. And that way, you know, each plant is going to be getting the appropriate sun. This is just another little example. Here you can see they've tiered pots, which I also really like. They took a bigger pot and then a slightly smaller one and then a smaller one. That's another great way to save space, but have multiple pots. in a space. And then also here with the colanders, I thought that was also very ingenious because you've got the drainage right there. Kind of pretty, just another unique idea. The ladder is nice as well for display. This garden here, I really, really love because they really have utilized this small space in such an ingenious way, and they've done companion planting very, very well. So one thing I keep talking about is companion planting, and I really want to talk about that a little bit more because it's very important, and not a lot of people know this, but the plants obviously have roots, and these roots can interact with each other, and plants will give off certain nutrients, and those can interact with each other. And sometimes they can be negative and sometimes they can be positive. So when you're making your garden, something you want to definitely look up is your companions to your plant. So this is a much more complicated guide that I'm showing you right now. There's so many free printable versions on Google. You can just Google companion planting and you will find charts and charts and charts of them. Find one that's easy to read. You can go pretty simple or you can go more complicated. Like this one's a more simple one. And it just tells you, you know, if you plant tomatoes, if you plant basil and marigold and carrots around it, asparagus, celery, onions, lettuce, these are going to do really, really well with them. Moving down to this one, you can see if you put peppers with beans, those are not going to do well together. Those are going to interact poorly and you're probably going to have poor growth. So sometimes when I have clients coming to me and they'll say, oh, this isn't growing properly, or I don't know why this isn't growing. Sometimes I'll even look in your container or I'll look in your plant line and see what you've got beside each other. And you can see where, oh, well, you're not going to have this be very prosperous because you've literally put leeks right beside your beans and those are going to react terribly together and you're not going to have a healthy plant at all. So that's definitely something to consider. And again, this is all stuff you're doing before you actually even plant. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I think I showed you everything. Oh, there's another little fun companion planting guide as well. This one shows you like some of the evil ones as well. So don't put these together. You don't want to put potatoes and tomatoes together. So I don't recommend doing those together as a joint planter. Some people have done that. It doesn't generally work too well. Some varieties will, but they don't usually. But anyway. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now. All right, I think I'm back. Did I? All right. So back to our map that we've been making. Now that we've sort of thought about that, okay, you're going to come back to your map, and what you're going to end up doing is you're going to start picking the plants that you want to grow on your balcony. So maybe you want to grow tomatoes and you want to grow broccoli and you want to grow some flowers because you want to have pretty flowers as well. So I like to make really simple circles. So I'll just draw a circle here and a circle here and a circle here. And then that's where I'm going to start planting. Okay. If you're doing container planting, you don't have to worry so much about companion planting, unless you do want to put them in containers together, which lots of people do, because sometimes you want to just have one bigger container. Like Betty, who's here for the first time today, she mentioned something about she had a new raised planter, and she's going to end up planting lots of plants in this raised planter together. So she's going to definitely consider the companions going into that container, because all of those roots are going to be intertwined and she's going to want to have them be prosperous. So you don't want to have stuff that's going to compete with each other. So that's definitely something you want to think about when you're planting your if you're making a giant container with lots of plants in them. So then I like to just write on here, I'll put tomato, broccoli, and then I'll put my flower here. Now I have to think, okay, so this is the full sun corner. So now, are any of these plants going to be impacted by the full sun? Nope, they're going to be really good in the full sun. So that's probably a good idea to have them over here. So now I have my part sun area, and I'm going to have a big planter over here. So now I'm going to think, okay, well, I really want peppers. So I'm going to put the peppers in here, and I really want some herbs. So I'm going to put herbs here, and I want some lettuce. So I'm going to put lettuce here. So then you're going to look those up, and you'll see, oh, you know what? First of all, my peppers definitely need to be in full sun. So they're not going to go over here. And they also don't do well with others. So I probably shouldn't plant peppers in here. So you'll take those out, and maybe you'll move peppers into their own little pot up here. And then over here, you have a spot. You can think, okay, well, now you can look at your companion chart. You can find something that does really well with your herbs or your lettuce. And you could pick out something that you might not have even thought about because you're just looking at what does well with those. So you might even open up your world of different plants just when you start looking at those charts and seeing what goes well with what you're planting. Now, another thing to consider too when you're doing container planting or balcony planting is temperature. So we talked about the full sun. Full sun is obviously really, really hot. Another thing that can happen if you're planting in the full sun is you can burn your roots if you're using dark pots. So if you are on a balcony, I always say use light colored pots or natural colored pots, because your black pot is going to get way, way, way too hot, and you might actually burn your roots. But on the alternative side, let's say you're doing peppers or hothouse items, black pots are actually really beneficial because they're going to make your soil warmer and they're going to make a more tropical, hotter climate. So again, you want to know what plant you're planting and think about all of the things that it likes. And that way you're going to have a really healthy, prosperous plant. Another thing too is I said, like, if you group them together, that's going to make them a lot cooler. So if you do have a pepper plant, like I literally put my pepper in a black pot in the middle of my yard where it gets the fullest sun. It is hot and dry, and you should see my pepper plants and the pepper production. It's crazy. And then alternatively, I have like my tomatoes kind of over in the other vegetable garden, and they're with others because they like to play with others, where peppers seem to not like anybody. And the tomatoes, you know, they grow with the beans and the onions, and they do really, really well. And that's, I don't know where I was going with that. That's just a thing. So that's it. All right. So one thing too that I was just like thinking about while I was just blabbering on there, is one thing you want to think about too when you're companion planting, because I had this happen to me, which is why I thought about this, is if you do put the same variety of plant beside each other. So like if you put 2 basils beside each other or 2 tomato plants beside each other, they're going to kind of marry and they're going to cross pollinate themselves, and they're going to make a mutated variety. So even if you plant a Roma tomato and you plant it right beside, you know, a Bonnie Best, let's say, you're going to end up getting these kind of variated, you're going to have kind of odd shaped Roma tomatoes, and you're going to have kind of different shaped Bonnie Best tomatoes, because they're going to work together to sort of make a different plant. A lot of people plant basil together too. If you plant purple basil and green basil together, all of a sudden you're going to be like, why are both my basils just green and purple? Because they're going to start working together and they can change each other. So that can be good. That can totally be good. You can get really creative and make some crazy fun tasting vegetables. I like to plant garlic beside my tomatoes because that can make my tomatoes a little more garlicky flavored in my mind. I don't know how true it is, but in my mind, I feel like they're a little more garlicky. So they're like my garlic tomatoes. I don't know. So you can have a little bit of fun with that. Another thing I like to always remind people too with gardening is don't stress about it. Really don't stress about it. This is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. It's a hobby. It's my profession, but it's still it's a hobby profession as far as I'm concerned. And I try not to get too worked up about things, because honestly, plants, they die. Sometimes they also just die for no apparent reason. And there's absolutely nothing, something internally happened. Like something inside of it just decided it didn't want to live any longer. And it just wilts and goes, and there's no rhyme or reason. It had water, it had sun, it had everything, but it just had some sort of internal disease, and you don't know what that is, and you can't necessarily diagnose it. So don't get so upset about it. Try again. Nobody in this world actually has a black thumb, even though everyone tells me this. I'm always saying you just haven't found the plant that likes you yet. And it's true, there's a plant for everybody. You will be, just keep trying, always try, and just keep doing it over and over again. Because really, that's the beauty of it. You don't have to worry about, it's like art almost too, in a way. Like, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever you want to do. And if you want to plant something that's not supposed to be planted here, who cares? Do it. Have fun with it. If it brings you joy, then do it. One thing I wanted to show you guys is these really cool, so I get these bags at the dollar store. It's amazing. These are at the dollar store. They're planting bags. I don't know if you can see them. They're kind of the craze these days. I really like them. Literally just fill this bag with like dirt and potato seeds or any kind of, and I plant vegetables on top as well. And it's really funny because they have these like handy pockets at the side for you to be able to like harvest your potatoes midway, but you can also check your roots and you can check on them, which is nice. They have drainage at the bottom, so you can set them out in your yard. But I really do like these bags because they make great vegetable gardens very, very easy for very, very inexpensive. So like I said, those are at the dollar store, just as an idea. Talking about the dollar store and watering as well, they have a really inexpensive irrigation system by Schultz, which is very funny, but they do. And I used it last year and it was pretty decent. So if you're on a balcony, consider using an irrigation system as well, because it makes watering so much easier, especially if you have hanging planters. Go up there once, hang these tubes down into your hanging planters, and then don't go up anymore. Don't do that lifting up and down. You're going to break your back. And that way you have water going into your planters hanging up, and it's a lot easier to water them. You'll be thankful for it. How's my time? I'm running a little short here. Got a few more things. Oh, I'm done. Time out. I'm okay. Okay. I wanted to just say too, protecting your stuff. Birds, you're talking about your service berries getting attacked by birds. Well, someone was earlier, they had a bush that just had a flock of birds come in and take all of their berries. So I always recommend this delightful product, bird netting. I don't know if I'm right. There's the English side, not the other one. There we go. Not that it matters, but this bird netting is at Home Hardware or Home Depot, any of those places. It looks like this. It's kind of, it feels sticky, but I put bird netting over all sorts of things. So even my containers, if you've got squirrel problems, I will fill this with soil. I will take this netting, I will put it over top of my pot, whoops, like this. Then I will cut a little hole, and then I will plant my plant in those little holes, and this will stop squirrels. They can't get through this, and they won't get to your bulbs and get to your plants that you've planted, and save your roots. Like, I don't know how many times I've planted like a nice sweet potato vine in my container, only to come out and find it on the ground and just chew to shreds, and I'm ready to get out the little BB gun or slingshot or something on those guys, even though I don't, because I do love all of nature. And as discussed earlier, I save spiders, so I'm not actually out there hunting squirrels. But anyway, I do try and prevent them. And this netting is really good. Another thing you can do if you're small space, if you're in the ground, is you can also lay this across your ground, weight it down, or use pegs, cut your holes, put your plants in. Again, you're gonna stop all those squirrels, bunnies, any of those little nuisance cuties that come into your garden and destroy cutely your stuff where you go. But and I wanted to do Critter Ritter as well. Critter Ritter is really good for your keeping out pests. And then I just also recommend, if you are really into gardening, and this is something you really want to do, don't just use the internet, because the internet is great, but buy a book. Buy a book, use it, write in it, put notes in it, mark up what you've done, keep your loose pages, because if you do your little map on a piece of paper, keep your paper from year to year. You'll see what you did the year before. Write down at the end in the fall, try and remember what was good and bad, make those notes to yourself. You're going to appreciate it in the spring, because the spring comes, you get so excited and you go, what the heck did I do last year? I don't remember anything. And you'll have your list and you can think about it, see all of those things and execute better than you did the year before.
Heather, one